What if I told you that the next great war won't be fought on land, at sea, or even in the skies, but far above us, in the silent void of space? It sounds like the plot of a sci-fi thriller, doesn't it? But this isn't fiction, it's reality. Right now, a high-stakes race is underway, one that could change life on Earth forever. Imagine waking up to a world where your GPS is useless. Planes are lost mid-flight. Phones can't connect. Global markets grind to a halt. That's the kind of chaos a war in space could unleash. And here's the terrifying truth. We might be closer to that nightmare than you ever imagined. But how did we get here? How did this cosmic arms race begin? Who are the key players? And how close are we to actual battles being fought beyond Earth's atmosphere? To understand how we've arrived at the brink of space warfare, we have to go back to a time when the world teetered on the edge of annihilation, the Cold War. It wasn't just a fight for supremacy on Earth. It was a battle that extended into the stars. In 1957, with a metallic beep that echoed around the world, Sputnik, the Soviet Union's tiny satellite, had merged into the Earth's orbit, and it shook the foundations of US security. If they could send a satellite to space, what else could they launch? Bombs? Spies? Suddenly, the skies weren't just a frontier of exploration. They were a potential battlefield. In response, both nations began turning space into a chessboard of military strategy. The United States launched covert projects like Saint, a satellite designed to intercept and disable enemy systems. The Soviets? They built something just as ominous, the Istrebitel Sputnikov, a weaponized satellite designed to destroy US space assets. By the 1980s, the race to weaponize space hit a fever pitch. President Reagan announced the Strategic Defense Initiative, Star Wars. Its vision was grand. Lasers, missile shield satellites, a network in space capable of intercepting any attack. While the program never fully materialized, it forced the Soviet Union to chase shadows, draining resources they couldn't afford. Fast forward to today, and the stakes are even higher. Space isn't just part of modern warfare, it's the backbone. GPS-guided missiles, satellites feeding real-time intelligence to troops on the ground. But now, there's a new twist. Private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin have flooded space with thousands of satellites, tilting the balance of power. Suddenly, space isn't just the realm of governments. It's a frontier for billionaires and corporations too. And yet, while satellites provide connection, they're also targets. In 2007, China tested an anti-satellite missile and shattered one of their own satellites into thousands of dangerous fragments. The US responded a year later, destroying a failing satellite in Operation Burnt Frost. These moments weren't just demonstrations, they were warnings. Then came 2019. India stepped onto the stage with Mission Shakti, destroying a satellite in low Earth orbit. Russia, meanwhile, has doubled down on orbital weapons, with a 2021 anti-satellite test that left the international community reeling. Thousands of debris fragments now hurtle through space, threatening astronauts and satellites alike. And China? They've perfected the art of ambiguity. Their space program is a carefully balanced act, part civilian, part military, but entirely strategic. Meanwhile, the creation of the US Space Force in 2019 sent an unmistakable message. Space is no longer just a frontier of exploration. It's a battlefield. This isn't the future. It's happening now. The rules of war are being rewritten, and the battle lines are drawn in the stars above. But who are the key players? What weapons are they building? And what does it mean for a world that relies so heavily on space? As of early 2025, private companies are playing an increasingly critical role in shaping the future of space. With over 5,000 privately owned satellites in orbit, the once government-dominated space race is now being driven by commercial innovation. But these satellites are not just about connectivity. They're becoming strategic assets in modern warfare. In recent years, SpaceX has emerged as a dominant player in space. Its Starlink satellite constellation, designed to provide global internet coverage, has already launched over 4,000 satellites, with plans to deploy tens of thousands more. But beyond civilian internet, Starlink has proven its military value. During the Russia-Ukraine war in 2022, Starlink played a vital role in maintaining communications for Ukrainian forces when traditional networks were disrupted. Despite attempts by Russia to jam Starlink signals, SpaceX quickly deployed software updates to counteract the interference, showcasing how private companies can directly influence conflicts. Meanwhile, Amazon's Project Kuiper, a planned constellation of over 3,000 satellites, is set to become another key player. While Kuiper's stated goal is to provide global internet coverage, experts suggest that its infrastructure could also be adapted for secure military communications and battlefield intelligence. OneWeb, backed by the UK government and private investors, has become a pivotal player in the space race. With over 600 satellites in orbit, it has secured partnerships with defense agencies in the UK and the US, providing secure, low-latency communications for military operations. But OneWeb's ambitions don't stop there. The growing potential to adapt civilian platforms for stealth and covert purposes has drawn significant attention. While these satellites are built for commercial use, they can be enhanced with technologies such as stealth coatings to evade detection or carry concealed payloads for intelligence gathering, communication disruption, or even targeted interference. This dual-purpose nature raises a critical question. How do we regulate systems that blur the lines between commercial innovation and military strategy? As partnerships between private companies and defense agencies deepen, the implications for global security are profound. Beyond satellite constellations, private companies are leading the charge in developing advanced technologies that could reshape space warfare. Raytheon and Northrop Grumman, for example, are pioneering on-orbit servicing satellites capable of repairing or refueling assets in space. While these systems have practical uses, they could also be weaponized to disable or dismantle enemy satellites, effectively turning them into orbital saboteurs. Lockheed Martin is another key player, pushing the boundaries of space weaponry. Its work on directed energy weapons and electronic warfare systems aims to defend critical assets from hostile attacks, or disable enemy systems without a single missile being launched. Such capabilities could completely redefine the dynamics of modern warfare. The integration of stealth technologies into these systems amplifies their impact. Civilian satellites can be adapted with radar-absorbing materials, hidden sensors, or covert communication nodes, transforming them into undetectable weapons in orbit. These developments make it increasingly difficult to distinguish between commercial and military assets, adding new layers of complexity to an already fragile space domain. With private companies advancing dual-use technologies at unprecedented speed, the question is no longer if space will become militarized, it's how far it will go. In this escalating competition, where innovation and ambition outpace regulation, the future of space hangs in the balance. With thousands of satellites orbiting Earth and tensions rising between nations, the risks of weaponizing space have never been greater. From catastrophic collisions to cyber attacks, the potential consequences of space warfare are far-reaching, threatening not just military operations, but the infrastructure we depend on every day. One of the biggest risks is space debris. When a satellite is destroyed in orbit, the resulting debris can spread across thousands of kilometers, creating a dangerous environment for all other satellites. This risk was made clear in 2007, when China's anti-satellite test created over 3,000 pieces of debris, and again in 2021, when Russia's ASAT test added another 1,500 pieces to the growing cloud of orbital junk. If a major conflict in space were to break out, it could trigger what scientists call the Kessler syndrome, a chain reaction where debris from one collision causes more collisions, eventually making entire orbits unusable for decades or even centuries. To address this growing threat, private companies like Astroscale and national space agencies are developing technologies to clean up orbital debris. However, some experts warn that these same technologies could be weaponized to remove or disable enemy satellites under the guise of debris removal. Unlike traditional warfare, the battlefield in space isn't always visible. Cyber attacks on satellites represent a growing and invisible threat. Among the most critical targets are GPS satellites, the backbone of modern civilization. Disrupting GPS systems could cripple military operations, halt financial transactions, and throw global logistics into chaos. GPS doesn't just guide military forces on land, sea, and air. It powers civilian life too, enabling everything from everyday navigation apps to global air traffic management and even the synchronization of financial networks. A single attack on key GPS satellites could lead to global economic disruptions and severe military disadvantages. In 2022, the European Union accused Russia of a cyber attack on the Ka-sat satellite network, which disrupted internet services across parts of Europe, including Ukraine. This incident highlighted how vulnerable space-based systems, especially those critical for communication and positioning, are to digital warfare. To combat this threat, governments and private companies are racing to secure space infrastructure. The focus is on satellite cybersecurity, strengthening encryption protocols, creating rapid response teams, and developing counter-cyber attack systems to protect GPS and other critical networks. For decades, the international community has worked to prevent space from becoming a battlefield. The cornerstone of these efforts was the Outer Space Treaty of 1967, which banned the placement of weapons of mass destruction in orbit or on celestial bodies. However, it didn't anticipate the rise of modern threats, such as anti-satellite weapons, space-based lasers, and cyber warfare. Today, new treaties aimed at addressing these emerging threats are being discussed. Progress is painfully slow. Major spacefaring nations remain hesitant to commit, fearing that restricting their space capabilities could weaken their strategic dominance. The absence of clear, enforceable international rules leaves a dangerous gap, where an arms race in space becomes increasingly likely. As nations compete to develop space-based defenses and offensive capabilities, the risk of miscalculation or escalation grows, threatening not just the peace in space, but global security as well. So, how can we prevent space from becoming the next battlefield? Experts propose several key strategies: forging binding international agreements to limit the development and deployment of space-based weapons, establishing clear regulatory frameworks for private companies operating in orbit, and improving diplomatic communication channels to reduce the risk of misunderstandings and unintended conflicts. While diplomacy advances slowly, both private enterprises and governments are investing in technologies to protect their critical satellites. These include advanced satellite maneuvering systems designed to evade potential threats, and robotic servicing satellites capable of repairing or reinforcing damaged systems in orbit. But despite these efforts, one fact is clear: space is becoming an increasingly contested domain, and the risks are escalating. The critical question now is, will humanity find a way to cooperate and preserve peace in space? Or are we on the verge of turning the final frontier into the next battleground? Space has always inspired humanity, once a symbol of endless possibility, where we dreamed of unity and discovery. Over time, treaties and agreements reflected our hopes to preserve it as a place of peace. But today, as technology advances and tensions rise, space is evolving into something far more complex: a contested battleground for power and control. The line between exploration and militarization is fading, and with it, the ideals we once held so dearly. Yet, the future isn't written. There's still time to choose a different path. By working together, nations, corporations, and individuals, we can tackle shared challenges like space debris, cybersecurity, and sustainability. We can preserve space as a place that inspires, connects, and uplifts us, rather than one that divides us. The choices we make today won't just shape what happens beyond our atmosphere. They'll define who we are as a species. In the end, what happens out there depends on us down here.